Hello and welcome to Snowpiercer's Train of Thought panel. I'm Ros Gold-Onwude. I'm a basketball and sports business broadcaster. I'm super excited to be here with all of you guys today. We're going to be discussing topics like social justice, class warfare, the Blerd community, and how all of these themes run through the show Snowpiercer on TNT, as well as our modern American society. We've got a dope panel here today of people who are super influential to the culture, and we've got to start with David Diggs. He's the lead actor of Snowpiercer in the role of Andre Layton. Also a Tony and Grammy award-winning actor, rapper, singer, songwriter, and producer. What's up, David?
What's happening? Excited to be here.
Also, we have Hebru Brantley here, a Chicago-born artist whose Flyboy and Lil Mama have become icons of their own, their stories and journeys people follow and collect worldwide. Hebru, it's great to see you. I'm a fan of the work. Great to see you.
Thank you. Likewise. Again, glad to be here.
Yep. I want to get to my girl, my friend, Morgan DeBaun. She is the founder and CEO of Blavity, Inc., the largest network of media platforms and brands serving Black millennials, also the creator of Afrotech Conference. Morgan, great to see you.
Good to see you, sis. Thanks for having me.
Right on, right on. We're going to get to Karama Horne. She's the founder of the Blerd Gurl, covering and providing commentary on comics, cultures, and all things geek. How are you, Karama?
I'm great. Really excited to be here.
I'm glad you're here too. And I don't want to have it be last but not least, but I'm definitely got to get to Hilton George. Hilton's the founder and CEO of Blerd Con, the Black Nerd convention, which is held annually each summer. Hilton, so glad to have your perspective here today as well.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's get right to it. Let's start with the show itself and how it relates to the world that we're living in today. For those of you watching, viewers can catch up on season 1 on HBO Max. But I think if we're going to talk about Snowpiercer, we got to start with you, David, and basically kind of just set the scene. Like for right now, where we are in America, globally, we've been dealing with the pandemic. In America, we've been ravaged with social and racial and political unrest. How does today's society, everything that we're going through here, reflect and relate to the plot and the storylines in Snowpiercer?
Well, I think at the bottom of everything, Snowpiercer is about everybody who's left on the planet figuring out how to live together, right? And when we come into the show, there's a particular system of government at play on this train that has for a lot of the population of the train has run its course. It is no longer serving them well enough. And so those are the kinds of things that lead to revolution. I think the happenstance of when it came out and everything that was going on in the US at the time and globally sort of led a lot of people to draw parallels in there that are there because they're baked into the fabric of the thing. The nice part of the Snowpiercer allegory is that when you put class on a train linearly, it makes it really easy to understand, right? Like the further this way you go, the less money and power you got. And so in order for people down here to get some of what's over here, they got to go this way, right? And so it maps the revolution out in a really easy line and allows you to sort of focus on the human conditions surrounding that and also because there's not that many people left alive in the world on the show, it's very easy to see how everybody is subject to this political system, whether they are a politically active person or not, right? Everyone's life is wrapped up in the revolution. It's unavoidable. So those are the things that stood out to me when I was sort of rewatching season 1 in quarantine. And those feelings kind of continue as season 2 starts to trickle out and you realize just how much the control of the governing system that we all live within affects all of us, whether or not we're active participants in it.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely caught my emotions, my heart, just seeing like what the nature of humans are in those situations, whether you're at the top of the class or if you're all the way in the back of the train trying to just scrap for anything, you know? And, I want to bring it to Karama and Hilton. You guys are following Blerd culture, TV. I know you guys are familiar with the show. As you're watching Snowpiercer, what did it make you examine about ourselves, about society, about the innate human qualities of interaction?
I got to say that it's like a microcosm of America. You have this marginalization at every level and all being pitted against one another. And we're witnessing this, as we watch the news, as we watch this past election, as we watch, the change in government, we watch how we are behaving toward one another and how the government is treating the citizens during a pandemic and a crisis. And it's like, watching those parallels is really, really, really strong for somebody who's a Blerd, where Blerd being, a subset of nerd, which is kind of got its own outcast aspect to it as well. This marginalization of the nerd community from greater society kind of goes in that same way. The communication, the interdependence, all of those things are playing out, in the show in a lot of the same ways that the nerd community is dealing with, the pandemic, the loss of conventions, the inability to engage in your nerdiness and the activities therein. All of those things are playing out in real time. It's a very, very strong parallel in my mind.
I think for me, what was really interesting was looking at larger society as it plays out also on the show. I think of essential workers. I kept thinking that essential workers are like the third class of this country. They have the highest amount of risk and the lowest amount of reward, and the inability to really move, especially like right now. And then I think the other thing that I was thinking of was how the upper classes, the higher cars, even when sort of staring down the barrel of anarchy, when hit with the thought of possibly losing their status, would include or excuse rather anything, including murder. And I just kept thinking of that when I'm struck by that when I think of things like, Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, when we see them being killed on screen in front of our real lives and people sort of excusing it. I'm trying to figure out who could look at this and not see the injustice. Oh, if you're looking at it from a class perspective, if I acknowledge that, then I have to acknowledge all these other things, and I don't want to actually lose my privilege in that case. So that was something else, another interesting parallel I saw when I rewatched season 1 also.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many parallels. And, I want to move the convo from Snowpiercer and focus even more on what's happening here in America. Morgan, one of the things that really kind of came out of all of the unrest, all of the protests this past summer was an even more focused conversation around Black economic equity and economic equity for Black communities. And that brings me to, how can we support Black-owned businesses?
Yeah, I think that we can support Black-owned businesses in the same way that we would expect people to support ourselves and one another, right? It's like it should be a part of how we operate on a daily basis, from the food that we eat to the products that we use, whether that is simple as toilet paper, all the way to the restaurants that you are ordering online on your services. Thinking about the show, I think something that's really interesting is when people advance, how responsible are you to bring the people behind you forward? And I understand sometimes it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be the simple click. There may be a bit of friction, although I think there's a lot of innovators and Blerds who are working on making that easier for us. And even big companies who are starting to make a commitment to make it easier for us. So I'm encouraged by that. I wonder how much it'll go away, if we don't continue to apply pressure, it doesn't continue to be a good business decision for them. But at least this is a moment of acceleration of awareness and consciousness. And I believe that through that human connectivity and ideally with better results, we're going to be able to keep it up.
I think, to sort of further what Morgan was saying, I think, it is something really, really, it's a long conversation to be had about how, we can keep the Black dollar and the Black community, and really bring our brothers and sisters up. And one of the mentalities that we have to have is, we have to have the McDonald's mentality. McDonald's is allowed to mess up your order every day, yet we still return to these establishments as an option for food, for sustenance. And the community at large has to allow for growth within these Black businesses. A lot of these folks are taking risk and putting themselves out there, and trying to create opportunities. And I think there has to be a consciousness around that from a consumer standpoint.
There's something around us. If the same product is Black and white, but one is maybe branded luxury, we're going to potentially not buy the Black thing because we want to be associated with the status of white privilege. That's where I'm excited around the designers, the artists, Black folks who are making advancements even in the quote unquote luxury space, so that we can also spend across the entire spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, I feel like that's a really valid point too. And, sure, put it on. It's exciting to see the business owners, make strides. But what about influencing the awareness, the thought process, the behaviors of the consumers? How do we influence those and make them more aware and change the perception, like you're saying, that perhaps Black isn't luxury?
I think you just actually said it in that sentence, influencer. When we think of concept, the work I do in the geek space, as well as a geek journalist, I'm constantly looking at trends and things like that. And it's really funny when we reach out and say, oh, I want to be an influencer, I want to be sponsored, we're looking at big, large corporations, white-owned brands, and we're chasing after that cheese that and they constantly change the rules. It's kind of like the train. You get to the front and everything's different. When it comes to the influencer space, I think we need to start looking to each other. Like when I'm looking for sponsorships for my podcast or my live show, I need to start accessing people in my community, because, hey, if they're already there, they're probably already fans of what I'm doing. And so are their fans. And actually, I could keep that dollar within that geek space, or within whatever the space is that I'm working in. But I think what we have this thing in our head where we have to go to a big brand to get a sponsorship, and you don't. Some of the people that could give you money to do what you do are Black-owned businesses that are already following you.
Hilton, I want to ask you this too, because there's different initiatives that will come out, especially as these conversations are more prevalent right now, like the 15% pledge, where basically that they're calling on retailers to make better efforts towards their shelf space holding Black-owned businesses and reflecting 15%, or more focus on hiring in executive positions and on their staffs for Black and minority candidates that are capable. And so you see at Blerd Con so many different businesses and consumers. Do you think initiatives like this work to shift or change consumer behavior?
Well, I think they can. It really depends on, the consciousness of the communities that you're targeting and the information that you're putting out. It's like a second layer of the chess game. We were just talking about direct engagement with Black businesses, but now we're talking about engaging Black businesses through white businesses. So we have to figure out, how do we direct traffic and direct people's eyes and direct people's awareness to what traditionally and historically white businesses are doing that we can support, that will then benefit Black business. And we have to be careful, because we also have to understand that these companies that are listed, Macy's and Lord & Taylor, and everywhere you go in a mall that might be participating in this, they are responsible to shareholders. And those shareholders are interested in the bottom line, which means that if this does not work, if we do not find a way to support, if we do not find a way to make this initiative financially advantageous or successful for this business, it will go away. So we have to prove ourselves as an audience and as a population that if a company comes in and participates in a initiative like the 15%, that we support it, and that we make sure that it is a successful initiative, and it will continue on and perhaps even grow. But I think there's an education factor here. I think a lot of us, who are in our adult world, 30 and up, I say delicately, we kind of understand how to support Black businesses and Black artists and Black initiative and Black communities. We've kind of got a little bit of practice. We need to, with the shifts in the marketplace, with the next generation that is coming up, that is going to be the ones holding that first dollar that we want to keep in the community, we have to find ways to educate them on exactly how to engage and how to support Black business beyond, hitting a like or subscribing. How do you direct your money? How do you direct your dollar, especially in the digital age? And if we can combine that education with the initiatives, it'll be successful. We'll see more of it, and we'll hopefully all benefit for it.
Often, too, I feel like we hear the word authenticity thrown around, too, into the equation, right? And I think that's a valuable word because, authenticity, our identity is currency. I mean, it's what people want. I'll bring this one to you, Hebru, because you've been able to build out a global following and sustain it over the course of years and years, and in a fine art space where, there are still gaps in exposure, in earnings, in visibility for Black and minority artists. And I'm curious how you just leaned in on your identity and your life experiences to build out your business.
When I was a lot younger, I had the fortune of having, great mentors, I think. And, one of those was John Johnson. My mother worked for Ebony Jet magazine for years. And she was, one of his personal assistants. And I think, between, having that influence, his daughter, and growing up in that environment and seeing what a fostered, responsible, respected Black business was, it always sort of stuck in the back of my mind that, I could eventually create something like this, creating an atmosphere that was uniquely my own and uniquely my story. And, I entered in through a unique space. I entered in through street culture, through hip hop. And I think that, no matter what, that sensibility is a constant through the work. But then also, like individuals on this panel, I kind of always felt a little alienated as well, just in terms of the things that I liked. I was a huge comic book and anime guy growing up, and I didn't have friends that were into that. But I think the best advice I got from a very well respected artist was like, paint what you know. And so it wasn't until I started to really, dig deep into who I was and figure out a way to sort of, contextualize that in the work where, it started resonating with people. The opportunity to continue to, build an audience and have people come with me on this journey, and the journey still feeling like it's uniquely mine and my story to tell. And, but also having people of different cultures identify with what I do is wonderful.
Karama, Hilton, are you finding that with the different people that you meet as you cover Blerd culture, that basically are people more buying into the person, the art? Like, what is it that draws people in?
I think it depends on what you're talking about. I think, and also it depends on whether or not it was before or after the pandemic or in the middle of it, I think in terms of what brings a lot of people together in terms of pop culture in the genre space, when I say genre, I'm going to refer to comic books, animation, anime, horror, science fiction, is fandom. So people come together that might not know each other, but they come together over the thing like that they love. So that might be The Mandalorian, or that might be Hamilton, or that might be, another, like, a show like Snowpiercer. And then the discourse happens on social media. And that's, and just like any other group of people, you have people that agree, people that disagree, people who can be nasty, et cetera. But I think I have seen since the pandemic started, a lot more communities, more people having more discourse and using social media to talk about what's happening or finding a way to use social media to talk about what's happening in the real world?
I was going to say that I think that, nerds come together through the fandom almost before anything else. That in which that draws them to the room at the same time is usually the most powerful introduction. I think when it comes to, individual consumption, it can be personality based. I think depending on the community and depending on what's important to any individual, especially in the Blerd community, I think that there is a certain amount of following for certain artists based on who they are and what they represent. I think there is a certain amount of it that goes into what the work says, which then ties into who the artist is and what is being created. I think there's a lot of identity that is being put into the sci-fi and anime and comic book world now that wasn't 10 years ago, with the creation and inception and even the switching of longtime comic book characters from one race to another race, specifically Black. I think that draws people in. I think you see a lot of that happening with some of the shows that are out and who you're following and why. But it really does depend on, what is the intention? You talked about authenticity. If we feel like something is forced, if we feel like something is artificial, it's less likely to generate its own gravity. And this goes for any fandom. This goes for any, quadrant of the nerd space. But I do think that, it can be personality based. And I think that selling yourself as an individual is a big part of how indie artists get themselves out there. And I think a lot of people who are fans of folks are also looking at that personality base.
In the genre space, we also have the same problem where if an artist is doing something with Marvel, then their stuff will get bought if it's marketed properly. But if they put out their own book, it's crickets. So one of the things that I try to do, and I feel Hilton's also doing it too, is trying to highlight also some of those indie creators and some of those artists that are doing amazing work that nobody sees because it's not packaged like the big two, like Marvel, like DC. If mainstream thinks something Black is cool, then more Black folks are going to think it's cool too. And we fight that. I think Black Panther helped with changing that a little bit, but still, Black Panther was not created by Black people. The movie was, but the character was not.
Facts. But there were some great Black characters that we hold on to. And it was also a really powerful moment, I think, for a lot of people in worldwide to see Black people as superheroes, So I'll actually start here with David then. What are some of your favorite Black characters in basic TV, comics, movies?
I've been like deep rediscovering the like Broken Earth trilogy again. Cyanide is like one of my favorite. I'm obsessed with that character, I think.
I the way play in Black characters yourself, whether it's in Snowpiercer as Andre or in Hamilton, like, how do you even step into these roles?
Thomas Jefferson is my favorite Black character. That's my favorite. That's the Blackest character I ever played, was Thomas Jefferson. I think what's great as an actor in the moment we're in right now, right? I imagine all of y'all like connect to this too in some way. There is at least in the Hollywood of it all, it's so content hungry. And like that has opened up a space. It's interesting because I'm producing a lot more now. And so I'm in these rooms and you see like the same list of directors every day. Like if someone's looking to attach somebody to a project, right, or something, you see like the same names are at the top of the list. But like right below the top of the list, the pool has gotten much, much wider and includes names of people who are just starting to make films but like are so buzzy right now that a lot of these larger companies are excited about the potential to capitalize on some buzz because like the opportunities are slowly starting to be created. And so in that space, I think, I don't know, because I don't write comic books, and I don't write novels either, but like there's something about the potential for a piece to be adapted that allows for a broader audience. We see it over and over again, right? And so, and the kinds of things that are coming my way is like, are you interested in adapting this? Or are you like, have you read this book yet? That are coming from like my mainstream agencies, you know what I'm saying? Is really, there is a change there that is significant. And so that's been pretty cool to see. And it does feel like sort of the indie space is being mined a little bit more. And certainly like everyone is at least interested in saying the name of a Black artist or a writer or something in a meeting in order to get those points. And then you see how far it goes from there. But that's better than it has been in a long time. And I was actually thinking while y'all were talking too, like, because while I have considered myself a Blerd always, I never attended Comic-Cons or things like that. Like that wasn't my jam. I know until I started going for my gig, you know. I just didn't know. I mean, I never, you know. Yeah. Well, but then I started going, and now then they shut down. But the communities that I was meeting there were amazing. And I think about this as it relates to theater too, because like the gathering, there's something about that physical gathering space is not only useful for everybody in the space and creates a sense of community, but also draws a kind of attention, a focused attention for a moment, right? When Comic-Con is happening in San Diego, it is like newsworthy everywhere. There's something about when the Hugo Awards are happening in person, like you hear more about it than everywhere else. And like, I don't know what I'm also curious as to what replaces that in this current climate. Like, I know there's virtual things, but they don't feel to me like they generate quite as much excitement and electricity. And I also just, as a person who misses doing plays and that kind of community gathering, like, are there things I don't know about right now that I should be keyed into, you know?
Hilton, I think that's all you.
The virtual space has been a really great stopgap, and it's been a really great way to kind of keep the community lines of communication open. But you're right, it doesn't have that same reunion feel to it. And if you've ever been to any type of nerd convention, obviously Comic-Con being kind of the Mount Olympus of conventions on everybody's calendar, it is where nerds come together. And a lot of nerds do not live and work in the nerd space. And the same is true for Blerds. Blerds don't necessarily wear their Blerd on their shirt when they go to work or church or even around the house. A lot of people have a very private relationship with their nerd experience, whatever that may be, video games, comic books, or what have you. And when you come to a convention, that's your opportunity to connect with your tribe. And, I think the conventions online, like I said, it's a great way to connect. It's a great way to kind of, make something happen, to kind of let everybody know that everybody's alive. But there isn't really much of a substitute for the actual gathering space. And that is why, we can't wait for this pandemic stuff to lift so we can kind of get back to the business of connecting, and being in each other's faces as we love so much.
We can really dive into some Blerddom right now.
David has always been, we're like Jedi. Blerds are like Jedi. We can tell when one walks into a room. We can kind of feel a ripple in the force, when you start, being in that space. It's just that kind of thing. And when he came on the scene in Blackish, it was kind of like, that's when I knew. I said, oh man, he's playing a Blerd character. And, everything I've ever seen. I know I'm talking about you right where you're right here, but so when you said you'd never been to a convention, I was kind of like, how is that possible? Because you struck me as somebody who had just came out the womb, with the tape on the glasses and were ready to be, all nerdy.
I did, and I am, but like, I also like, I'm not great in large crowds sometimes. But it was wild because the experience of going to conventions, which the first ones I went to were stuff that my partner Emmy was going to. She's on Umbrella Academy, so she really started going to cons before I did, and I would stand behind her and just like sort of observe. And other than Worldcon. I went to Worldcon because the Clipping album got nominated, which was like, is the greatest honor of all the awards I've been nominated for. That one to me is like the most special by far, to be able to go to the same convention as NK and like, you know, say, like be mentioned at the same time as all these novels that I read. So like that was, so all that to say, like, I do consider myself part of the community, but like, you know, I'm kind of a private dude. I be in the house a lot.
No, but that's interesting. Like Hilton was like, I recognize him as a Blerd. And actually earlier you said, you know, I'm part of this community. I guess I am a Blerd. So this is a question for all of y'all, but I'm going to start with David then. When did you first maybe think that I'm a nerd?
I don't remember a time not thinking it. I don't think, I mean, like you find that stuff out pretty quick. And also I'm from Oakland. I'm like, I grew up in the Bay Area, which is different in some ways than a lot of places. Like there's a lot of, you know what I'm talking about. Like the community, whatever your community is there already. So it's not, I didn't have the same sort of isolation feelings coming up like that. There were other Black nerd friends who I was friends with. I didn't like the experiences that, like, as I know I've talked to Hebru a lot about like his experience growing up. I think like mine was a little bit different in that sense, although like a significant minority. And I did grow up like because of shared interests with a lot of white friends too, that like some of my other Black friends didn't have as many white friends because they weren't as interested in the nerdy things I was into. When I like things, I really like them, you know? And like I was like, the first thing I was ever nerdy about was music, right? And I was the kid, I was at Amoeba Records every Tuesday, and I would like anything I could get my hands on, I would listen to and buy if I could afford it. And I read every word of every liner note of every CD I ever bought and all of the acknowledgments because I wanted to see who this artist liked in order to figure out like the other things that I should listen to and stuff. Some of my favorite local rappers would also go to the music. Gift of Gab used to go to Amoeba also every Tuesday. And I was a big fan of his, but I couldn't talk to him. I was too nervous. So I would like stand behind him and just sort of like see what he was looking at and then run over when he left. Like, look at those things. So the part of Blerdness that involves fandom, like when I'm a fan of something, I'm a fan of something. And I've always felt that way. And it's like not something I've ever been afraid of or shy about really, because it's fun.
Hebru, David mentioned your experiences, you know, and how they compare. You know, if it happened, when was the first time you might have thought, I'm a nerd? And then what was your experience with that?
I don't know the very first time, but I grew up in a big family south side of Chicago. So I heard, you know, your nerd ass all the time. Excuse my French, but you know, I came from a family of basketball players, you know, and athletes. And, you know, for me, like all of that was cool. But, you know, I give you a perfect example. One night I was coming home with my mom, you know, it was late at night. We're coming from my grandmother's house. We pull up to our apartment building. And at the time we were staying sort of South Loop, Chicago. And, you know, Michael Jordan is literally out front of our house filming a commercial. It was like back like early Jordan days when he was doing car commercials for Mercury. And he was out there trying to hit this shot. He had to shoot the whole point of the commercial was like he was shooting a shot into the sunroof of his car. And he, for whatever reason, he couldn't make it. However, when my mom saw it, she was like, oh my God, it's Michael Jordan. Don't you want to see him? And I got down on some mic, but the He-Man like holiday special was also on at the same time. And so, you know, priorities, like, so I was like, this is cool, but can we go upstairs? Cause I'm trying to catch the end of that. And then after that was over, I came back downstairs to see Mike. But like, you know, I got so deep into it, you know, at a point my mom really tried to slide in art, you know, as an aside, like, hey, you know, you can explore sort of the same things through, you know, art. And when you find that thing that you really like, wanting to have a piece of that, you know, and whatever that means, from a t-shirt to a book to a figure to whatever. And Lord knows I got that collector's gene pretty bad.
Morgan, I want to bring it to you because, you know, you started Afrotech, and I'm sure that there is certainly a Blerd community that is spoken to there, but also, entrepreneurs, business, people in tech. And that also is an identity and a community that maybe as when we were growing up, it didn't seem like those were the natural points for us to like be in or find our acceptance in those communities or career paths. So, how does all of that come together for you?
Yeah, I mean, I remember coding when I had Neopets and I like started to try to like hack currencies because of the online currencies of Neopets. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm saying, and or even Sims when you would like go online and you try to like learn all the code so you could have infinite lives or infinite coins, right? Like we were coding. You guys are laughing because I know you did it, right? So, our community is full of innovators and techies and nerds. It just wasn't part of something that we talked about. It wasn't cool to talk about. It's not like I went back to school and was like, yo, do you have that code for like hacking all of the like Sims coins? No, we were on sub communities and forums and threads. And I think, Afrotech was designed out of wanting to bring that forward even further. So being a Black woman in tech, working at big tech companies, I loved my job. I loved innovation and creating products for millions and millions of people and being involved in those kind of conversations around platforms. And yet I was feeling that I was disconnected from my culture and applying that same methodology that you find in Silicon Valley everywhere, from the Uber that you're in when you're walking down the street, the cafe, you can't get out of it. It's part of the pulse of the Bay. And yet we weren't doing that for Black folks and our issues and our challenges and the problems that we wanted to solve. And so Blavity Inc. in general was designed to just narrow in on that for our community. And then Afrotech pushed it even further with saying, by the way, let's have this moment together every year, just like we were talking about earlier, where we're coming together and we're just so loud and so obnoxious across the entire internet. Like you can't be in the Bay, Black, white, Asian, I don't care. Like we are there, right? We are taking over every street, every club. We are having a blast. And actually, when I started the conference, it was in San Francisco because I was very much like, white people, you will see us, And then we moved it to Oakland because I even taken my own advice of like, why do we do things for whiteness? Like, let's just be unapologetically Black and put all the money back into our own economy. And, you spend millions of dollars at conferences through hotel rooms and restaurants. And so we booked up all of Oakland, right? And then made it more accessible and did partnerships and actually did the work for ourselves. And I think we're all doing this in our different respective ways, whether that's in the Blerd community, in the artist community. Like it's really important that we set up networks for ourselves.
So Morgan, I totally get your passion and the vision when you started Afrotech. Hilton, what was your purpose? What was your goal when you started Blerd Con? And why did it need to be started?
Well, it was for me, I came back into the nerd space and discovered cons as an adult, having left it going to college and the Army and places like that. And I started going out to conventions and cosplaying. You can't really see my lab here, but I've got Deadpool cosplays over here. I've got robotics cosplays over there. It's a nightmare over here for anyone who's a muggle who doesn't enjoy this stuff. I'm telling you, this is not the place. But I was going to these conventions and I kind of had this scene in Do the Right Thing where Bugging Out is sitting in Sal's Pizza and he notices that there ain't no brothers on the wall. And I kind of was looking around and I saw us in the audience. I saw us in the attendance. I saw us purchasing and being a part of this engine that kind of ginned up the community, 20, 30, 40,000 people at a time. But then I would look on the dais and see who was on the guest list, and it wasn't us. And then I would look on the panels and I would see what the subject matter was, and it wasn't speaking to us. And I said, well, there's an imbalance here. We are now an underserved community, even within our niche of the geek space. And I said, well, somebody should make a convention for that. And with no sense of self-preservation, I kind of leapt into it and, made some phone calls and, did all the business stuff. And 2 years later, Blerd Con was born. And the whole idea was trying to figure out how do you create a balance between creating an authentic nerd space that invites Black nerds who may have never seen a Black space, and mixing that with people who might be nerds who come from a Black space. If you're from Chicago or New York or Atlanta, you probably have seen, your fair share of Black geekiness, in certain spaces. But, if you're a Black kid in Ames, Iowa, you may have never seen 4 Black cosplayers standing in the same room. So we have to figure out, how do we, merge and express our Blackness in the space that is authentically geek. And it's been a really, really great adventure. The community is, really starting to discover this. Remember, the term blerd came about during the show Scrubs in the 90s. So this is not a long time word. We've been here for a long time, but the term blerd is new. I have discussions everywhere I go with Black nerds coming to my table, asking me what a blerd is. And I just kind of point and it's like, it's you. And we have that discussion. And I think that awareness that there is a community within this community that can be mutually supportive, both in the Black geek space and the non-Black geek space, coming together, putting on panels, supporting guests, that kind of stuff is not automatically known. And I think that we've kind of found a way to create a galvanizing event, an expressive event, and a gathering event for the Black nerd community. And so we've been going for as long as we've been going, and we're going to keep going until we can't go anymore.
I think that's a perfect way to talk about it. Like, I appreciate the definition and also kind of the scope of what a blerd is, like a Black nerd. And there's been an evolution around developing that community, and even an evolution around how we even conceptualize being nerdy. David, back in the day when if you were losing yourself in comic books all day or playing video games all day, that was considered nerdy, and not necessarily in a really positive way. And now those comic books are becoming, blockbuster films, esports, gaming. I mean, these are legit professions with huge bags and earnings that people are making. How do you see nerd culture, things that are nerdy, influencing future culture?
I mean, I think there's been a reclaiming, or I guess like just a vocally claiming of that space, of that term, like of being a nerd, and like it's become cool. And so, those things used to be in opposition, right? Like being a nerd and being cool were the opposites of each other, but that's not the case anymore. And I think it's because nerds are like a main driving engine of culture and commerce and certainly like art, and things that we all consume, right? Entertainment. And so I think I wouldn't expect that to slow down at all. I think what is nice about the understanding that I think Black folks who also happen to be nerds come to that with is like an understanding of the need of, this is what Hilton was just talking about, of like an already marginalized space to still make space and actively reach out to the folks who don't know about that, right? It is easy to assume that because you are a marginalized community that you get it, that you're more open than the community at large. And that's not necessarily true. You don't always it's not always as open to everybody as it should be. And so I think because the Blerd community in particular is like reaching out in all directions, I think it will continue to be an engine of culture creation, because you'll keep there's no shortage of creativity, of fandom, of excitement, and of like capacity to produce things. And so I think that's, you kind of can't beat that. There's nothing you can do with that.
Absolutely. And building out that sense of community, and then also being a force influencing, impacting, and creating the culture. Guys, I want to thank you so much for your insights today on this panel. All of you, thank you so much. For David, Hebru, Morgan, Karama, Hilton, Thank you also to everyone watching. I'm Ros Gold-Onwude, and I had a pleasure spending time with all of you. Thank you. Make sure you watch new episodes of Snowpiercer on TNT on Monday nights at 9, 8 Central. And you can catch up on Snowpiercer Season 1 on HBO Max.